Go.
Hello, this is Dr. Erica Ollinger, Crisis Team School Psychologist at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. You've heard about it on the news and thought it was something that only happens in other countries. But the truth is, human trafficking happens everywhere and is a significant problem even in our community. It could be going on right under your nose. Predators have upgraded, from white vans to keyboards, and they use social media to target children. An innocent online friendship or an invitation to a party could be a trap. There may be someone grooming them through text messages. A child might already be in a situation that they can't get out of. It's important that you monitor your students and recognize signs that they are potentially being targeted. Sudden changes in behavior, like rule breaking when a student was well behaved before, or acting out, or using sexually explicit language, could be warning signs of abuse. Other signs may be more subtle, like a sudden reluctance to talk to others. Regardless, speak up if you suspect something. Use the resources at your disposal to keep up to date on how predators are targeting children and what you can do about it. As a teacher or school administrator, your intervention could save a child from becoming a victim. Don't let them fall through the cracks. If you suspect abuse, it's your obligation to notify local law enforcement. You can also call the Oklahoma School Security Tip Line. For more information, contact the Office of School Safety and Security by either phone or email, or visit our page at the Oklahoma State Department of Education website.
Okay, so thank you for that introduction there. So we're really excited that you're here. Not so excited that we have to discuss this topic, but my name is Cindy Swearingen. I am the Assistant Executive Director for the Office of School Safety and Security, and today we're going to be speaking on human trafficking, what educators need to know. For those of you who are unaware, every third Thursday of the month, we have an action and awareness campaign. And this is January is Human Trafficking Month, so that's why we chose this topic. Next month will be options-based training, and so be on the lookout for the registration information coming out in the newsletter, admin newsletter, as well as some other venues, and we hope to see you there for that. But today, we have 3 of our state's top experts in human trafficking. And so I'm just going to turn it over to them. But first of all, I want to introduce you to our experts. And I just want to say thank you and a shout out to them for being willing to share their expertise. Oh, I guess I need to introduce our team first. Sorry about that. So here's our school Office of School Safety and Security. Someone said I'm muted. Am I muted? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay. Okay. John Parker is our Executive Director. I'm the Assistant Executive Director. We have Michael Ann Uten. She serves on the western side of the state, as well as Jason Gray. And he's kind of you see his face up there. He's kind of the behind the scenes tech. But Michael Ann and Jason work with basically the western side of the state. And then Steve Lynch, he works for the eastern side of the state along with me. And then Lindsay Moore, she's the glue that holds us all together. She's our coordinator. And we're just have an awesome team. And so that's our team. But our speakers for today, and I'm going to leave this up. You guys want to take a picture of this, whatever, in case you want to contact any of them. First off, we have Dr. Denny Bloom. Denny is the Associate Professor of Social Foundations in Education at Oklahoma State University. She is also a member of the Oklahoma Coalition Against Human Trafficking organization. And she's also my professor because I'm going to start taking her class on Monday. Human trafficking, and she'll give you some more information about that. So she's a true professional in that. Next up, we'll have Paula Royce. Paula is the Female Programming Coordinator for the Family Center for Juvenile Justice, also known to most as the Tulsa County Juvenile Bureau. She has been facilitating gender-based groups for females called Girl Power in schools, detention centers, shelters, and residential placements for nearly 20 years. Seeing over 125 girls a week. That's awesome. Girl Power is an evidence-based, trauma-informed, medically accurate program, which builds on girls' strengths and provides accurate, confidential resources and services to youth. She also co-chairs the steering committee made up of 27 member organizations of the Oklahoma Coalition Against Trafficking, as well as chairing the Education and Awareness Committee. She has worked with dozens of victims, helping provide safety and healing through partnerships and services. So thank you, Paula, for taking the time to speak with us. And then we'll wrap up with Jason Wise. Jason is the co-founder and president of the Demand Project, and it is an organization that exists to eradicate human trafficking, online enticement, child abuse imagery, and the commercial sex exploitation of children. The Demand Project recently opened one of the largest residential DHS certified campuses for minors of minor victims of sex trafficking in the United States, called Mount Acura. You may need to correct me on that, Jason. Jason is also a full-time detective for the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. He is part of the Child Predator Unit, and he works undercover to arrest and prosecute online predators seeking to exploit children. Yay. He recently became an Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force member and also works human trafficking cases. So with that, as I said, guys, we have some experts who know their craft and know it well. So at this time, I'm going to hand off to Dr. Bloom. And with that, Dr. Bloom, take it away. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Cindy, for inviting me. And I'm going to give a very brief introduction, and then Paula's going to follow me, and then we'll have a pause for questions. So just so you know what's coming up before Jason gives us some further information. And then we'll have questions after that. I also wanted to mention that I am teaching a course, and I will put the information in the chat at the conclusion of my presentation. I'm teaching it's via Zoom, it's virtual, just like what we're doing right now, a course on child sex trafficking. And it meets on Monday nights. It starts this next Monday. So if you're interested in that, it's Monday from 7:20 to 10 p.m. So I know it's a little late, goes a little late, but it also doesn't conflict with most people's work schedules. And so we're trying to accommodate people in the community, people in the schools, our own students at OSU. But it is an OSU course, and I'm going to provide information on how, if you're interested, you might want to enroll as a non-degree seeking student. And when you also get a certificate of completion at the end. I also want to mention that the course, one of the caveats of this course is that I'm going to say almost every single time we have a class meeting on Monday night, we have a guest speaker expert. So you will hear from people in all types of services that address this issue, including Paula. But anyway, more is yet to come. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to start by asking people to put in the chat, what is the difference between teen prostitutes and commercial sexual exploitation of children? Are they the same? Are they different? If they're different, in what way? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to fill up the chat with what your thoughts are. Okay, I'm seeing some, I'm just going to read out some of the answers just in recognition of our time. So, you know, some people say it's the same. one says it's a choice, which I'm assuming that's teen prostitutes are a choice, or teen prostitution, voluntary versus non-voluntary. Okay. There's no such thing as a teen prostitute. They are all exploited. Okay. Well, I think that kind of sums up the different perspectives on it. And there is no such thing as a teen prostitute, because if you have not reached the age of 18, you cannot consent to this activity. There is no, you're automatically protected. It doesn't matter what you did. And even if you say with your own words and all your heart, I love this and I'm doing it on my own volition, you're still not a teen prostitute. You're being exploited. This is the sexual exploitation of children. And it's commercial because we're dealing with an exchange. There's something that's being given in exchange for this exploitation. Perhaps they're given a place to live. Maybe they're given money, dinner, whatever. So there's a lot of different reasons. So human trafficking just is really a recent phenomena as far as being on the books as a crime. It used to be, under prostitution, but human trafficking by itself, which is really important to know those words, came about in 2000 as far as being criminalized as human trafficking. And so human trafficking has two prongs to it. It can either be sex trafficking or it can be labor trafficking. And so when we look at sex trafficking, this is it. Typically, this is what's on the books: induced by force, fraud, or coercion, on which a person is induced to perform such act and has not attained 18 years of age. So it is, if they're under the age of 18, it's automatically trafficking. If they're over the age of 18, they have to figure this out. But it has to be force, fraud, or coercion if it's over the age of 18. None of those are involved if it's under the age of 18. It's automatically trafficking. With labor trafficking, it's the same thing: force, fraud, or coercion, but it's for some type of service, labor. For example, it could be somebody, a domestic worker, cleaning homes, doing whatever type of labor. And again, there may be an exchange of some sort, but it isn't commensurate with what they're doing. So they're exploited. In both situations, there's exploitation. Neither requires transport across borders. And in fact, a lot of the trafficking in any state is done within the state. Of course, there is trafficking that happens that comes from foreigners being trafficked, immigrants being trafficked. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but the bulk of our trafficking is within our state. And also just understand that a lot of times when people are transported across state, it's smuggling them. They may be at some point they may be trafficked for labor or sex, but initially crossing the border is, international borders is smuggling. And minors per se are victims. They cannot consent to trafficking. So again, under the age of 18, no force, fraud, or coercion is necessary. It's automatically trafficking. Okay. So what does that include? So it includes rape, sexual abuse. When we're talking about exploitation, sexual exploitation, it also is I'm also going to include child sexual abuse imagery or material. So I just want to highlight that I'm avoiding the term pornography, because I think pornography is condoned and it's more acceptable. And with children, it's never acceptable. It's abuse, always abuse, sexual abuse. So I don't personally use child pornography because It's child abuse imagery. And then it's in exchange for anything of value, such as food, shelter, drugs, money, clothes. Um, that's what it includes. And finally, I want to give you some statistics. We're looking at current statistics. In 2020, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received more than 17,000 reports of possible child sex trafficking. All 50 states were represented. Urban, suburban, rural, and tribal lands were represented. And I want you to understand, these are the reported cases. And we have no idea how many cases are unreported. And I'm sure it's many, many, many more. And I was going to say, I want you to think about, why is this not a well-reported case? Can you put any of your ideas in the chat box? Why do you think that child sex trafficking is an underreported phenomenon? Shame, yes. Fear, right. Accepted in the family. In fact, it is not uncommon for families to traffic their own children. I'm just saying that there are cases of that. That's not what every family does, obviously, but there are cases where families do this. They don't realize what it is. I think that's a good answer too. I think many young people that are trafficked don't understand it as that. They certainly haven't been told that it's that because it continues. There's a threat of violence. That's common too. And then the children are groomed into this, to accepting that role at some point, or the fear, right? Made feel guilty, right? And also you have to think, even within a religious context where they're told that this is, not supposed to happen, and they participate in it, and now they feel like they will be rejected, right? So that's something in addition to that, but it's very underreported. So just thinking those numbers are the ones that are reported, there are countless more that are not reported. Okay, so 7% of child sex trafficking victims were boys. So I don't want to just say this is about girls, because there are male victims, and for some of the same reasons, the shame, the cases of boys are underreported as well. In 2013, 1 in 7 child runaways was a victim of trafficking. 67% were in the care of the child welfare when they went missing. So, when you run away, you're in a desperate situation, and those who traffic are looking for people in desperate situations. I mean, that's one of the vulnerabilities. And you need food, you need shelter to live. And so this becomes another population that gets preyed upon, are the runaways. And Paula's going to talk more about the other vulnerable populations. I'm just mentioning that. The average age of recruitment into exploitation is 12 to 14 years of age. There are younger victims and older, but that's the average age. And so approximately 60% of children exploited for rape or sexual abuse were first recruited by peers. And so I think this is another reason why it's so important that educators know about this, because the peer culture usually is what's happening at school. That's where kids meet their friends, as well as in their neighborhoods. So, on average, a child may be sold more than 15 times a day. They can be sold many more times than that. And I think the most serious thing is that 7-year life expectancy after recruited. This is for minors, again, under the age of 18. You ask, why 7-year life expectancy? Well, the people that exploit them, or even the Johns that use them, I mean, they're prone to attacks, definitely abuse, HIV or other diseases. It's not uncommon for those children that are involved in this, for their trafficker to use drugs in order to coerce them into this situation and groom them to be what they need to, what he or she wants them to be. So it's not uncommon for them to have drug addictions. There could be overdose or even suicide. And I think the one thing is we do focus on recovering child victims, but just recovering child victims is not enough, because of what they've experienced is not easy to recover from. And so it could even happen that the child takes their own life, because coming to terms with what they've been through is they've endured so much trauma that may be one way that they deal with it. Certainly depression. So those are some reasons that I teach the course I teach, is because I feel that we need to, those of us that are in the schools are with the masses almost more than anyone else I know. And I'm a former school teacher, and I wish I had known more about this when I was a school teacher. It goes undetected or untreated or mistreated. And so I hope that this will help you. Again, Paula will give you more information. I just put in the chat my information, and the course I'm teaching is, it has a CRN number, and that's important to identify the course. And if you want more information, you're certainly welcome to email me, and I will be more than happy to give you more. But with that, I think a lot of questions Paula's presentation will answer for you. I know some of you have asked some questions, but I think it's best to wait till Paula goes, and then we can go from there. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Royce. Good to see everyone today. So please hold on to your hats. We're going to put about an hour's worth of information in about 15, 20 minutes. So I'm not using a PowerPoint. You're please welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns. First of all, I always like to open up by saying, please practice self-care. Take care of yourself. Some of this information may be triggering for you. And if it is, please take care of you. That's the most important thing. Also, I always tell people I always have permission to share stories. And I also like to be very upfront and say that my cuss jar tips over pretty periodically. So hope I don't offend anyone by that, but I'm just giving you a heads up. So everybody hearing me okay? Everybody good? Okay, good. So Dr. Bloom went over a lot of great information. I love that she opened up with the question about teen prostitute, because there is no such thing. There's not the word teen prostitute. As Dr. Bloom announced to you, and I hope everyone was clear, anyone under the age of 18 is considered a victim. There is always force, fraud, or coercion present. We have also, Polaris refers to this as modern day slavery. They are saying that we perhaps have more people between labor and sex trafficking that are being forced to work than we did when slavery was legal. So we need to be always remember that those elements of force, fraud, and coercion are always present in someone that is being victimized under the age of 18. So again, we need to change our language. If you are calling young people teen prostitutes, please don't do that anymore, and change your language up and refer to those young people as victims. So a little bit here. We're going to talk about some risk factors. Polaris and the National Human Trafficking Hotline reports that the #1 vulnerability for youth is missing from care. If you'll please hear my language, I'm not using that word AWOL. AWOL connotates maybe that the child is doing something wrong. We are really here at the Juvenile Bureau really trying to change our language up and not referring to children as AWOL. We're referring to them as missing from care. That simply means that we've asked you to stay somewhere and you've chosen not to stay there. We are trying to get away from AWOL because, you know, I'd run from some of these places too. So I don't think that we need to put all that back on the kid. And, you know, the kids I work with absolutely do not need any more labels. So we have to be very careful on that. I want to be really clear on that. System involvement, huge red flag. My system, DHS, we unfortunately have so many kids with us that are duly involved that we have a particular docket for kids that are DHS as well as Juvenile Bureau. So being system involved is definitely a risk factor. And I think we hopefully have time to talk about that, but I think you can get it in your head why that is true. History of abuse and neglect. Most of our, we know from data, and especially from juvenile justice data, that oftentimes victims have experienced violence and things way before they even come into our system. So again, we know that sometimes that violence can become normalized. It might be at the hands of a family member. So the young people are already being victimized before they enter systems. So I think that's important for everyone to keep in mind. ACE scores. Most of the people on here are educators. This is great because this gives you an opportunity to develop relationships with kids, which I think is like the number one thing that can help bring a victim to a survivor. So I do this with my groups. We're going to pretend a minute that it's not COVID and we're all back live with people, but I do it anonymously and it helps me decide how I'm going to facilitate. If the average ACE score in my group is 3 or the average ACE score in my group is 7, that's going to dictate my facilitation, because we need to know it. And if you're not familiar with ACE, the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, please Google it and take a look at it. You know, it was developed by an MD. He was actually looking at obesity. And this is what kind of started looking at back on what happens in childhood that affects us as an adult. Lack of educational, employment, economic opportunities. If some of you have read Monique Morris's book, Push Out, this is a great example, especially for girls of color. They are actually being pushed out of our educational system. They're being suspended 6 times the rate of white girls for the exact same offense. So again, keep all of these things in mind as we look at it. Untreated mental health struggles. We know in juvenile justice that unfortunately a lot of the young people that we serve have a lot of untreated mental health struggles. So we know that that's relevant in this child. Denny talked a little bit about drugs. You know, addiction is definitely a risk factor for young people because if you are addicted to something, you need a dealer. And pimps love this. That's just another way of control. So intentionally will try to get a young person addicted to drugs because not only now am I your pimp, I'm also your drug dealer. So you definitely need me and you definitely need to do what I tell you to do because I'll withhold all of those things that you need. Excuse me, unique to the community, unique to the individual. Community can actually be a risk factor. We know spots. I know not everyone here is from Tulsa on this training, but we know those of us that live and work in Tulsa, we know some of the hot spots. I'm sure that in each of your communities, there may be hot spots where it's a little riskier to live. Societal, again, that, you know, the educational piece, the push out, the things that sometimes our young people are not being treated fairly. Disproportionately, girls and women of color are trafficked at a much higher rate. And disproportionately, and unfortunately, the buyers are generally white men. So let's go back to that, you know, that slavery piece. And that's what some of our survivors have told us is that people feel like they actually can do whatever they want because you are bought and paid for. So please keep that in mind. And also familial. Dr. Bloom talked a little bit about that. We have data, and Jason may have more, but up to 30 to 40% of trafficking in Oklahoma is familial. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, right there, your mom or your daddy. That can be your uncle, your cousin, because it does happen. It's not necessarily at the hands of an older person. As Dr. Bloom talked about, recruitment is oftentimes done with a peer. So I like to talk about that too. Something that is very important, I want everyone to hear, I briefly touched on people of color are disproportionately victimized. The LGBTQ community is 5 times more likely than a heterosexual youth to become victimized. So let's be very aware of that. That is according to a report just released by Futures Without Violence. And I think that's another training where we can talk about why those risk factors are prevalent and why that community is especially more vulnerable to exploitation than their heterosexual friends. So let's talk about red flags. Denny touched on this a little bit. History of missing from care, a huge one. You know, I get most of my information from the girls I work with. I build relationships with them. I sit and listen. In my girl power groups, the first thing we do is we kind of talk about stuff when we first get together. So that's a great time for me. Any of you that have children, my children are grown now, but I was always the mom that volunteered to drive because they forget when they're talking that you're in the car and you get to hear all kinds of good stuff about what's going on. Same thing with my girls groups. I learn more information from the girls that I work with about other young people than I would anything else because they like to talk about it. It's been, you know, especially, or I'll bring it up. I'll say like, you know, so-and-so hadn't been she hadn't been here for a couple of weeks. What's up? And they'll be like, yeah, Miss Paula, I heard she was hanging out at it. So it gets you going on some stuff. And that's a good that's a good time for you to gather information. Involvement with new friend group. Possibly older people, doesn't necessarily have to be, but maybe you've noticed that student is gravitating towards a whole different group of friends. Again, Dr. Bloom mentioned disconnect from maybe the friends that they had been, maybe they've been playing sports and they decided they're going to drop off the team. Disconnect from normal family activities, normal school activities, that can possibly be a red flag. If you're in the healthcare industry or if you know enough about a young person, history or reoccurring STIs, STDs. That's a big one. We like to take all of our young people to the clinics to get checked out. We think that it's very important. It's also very empowering for a young person to be able to make their own sexual health choices. Remember, a lot of these choices have not been given to these young people. And oftentimes choices and coercion look a lot the same. I saw a lot with Denny was talking about a lot about choice and, you know, choice and coercion can look the same, especially if you are a 14-year-old traumatized child. So, you know, I think that we have to be real careful using that word choice when it comes to young people. Again, let's watch our language. Unexplained cash, upgrades, clothing, phone. Dr. Bloom talked to you a little bit earlier about it doesn't necessarily have to be the exchange of money, but it can be something that is of value to the child. Let's go to Maslow's theory. You know, if I've been on the streets for 4 days and I have not had shelter, I haven't had a shower, I haven't had all of that stuff, probably the most important thing to me is going to be eating, taking a shower. So as you know, with Maslow, unless everything on that first level is met, you cannot go any higher. You're stuck. So those needs are not being met. Young people have to find a way to meet those needs. Again, unexplained absences from school. You guys are great. You're right there. Hopefully we'll all be back in the classroom by maybe September of 2021. And so it'll be easier for you to keep track of all your young people coming and going. Restricted movement, controlled communication, gang involvement. This is a big one. My former partner at the Juvenile Bureau used to do a lot of work in gangs. And so we talked about this. Gang members like to victimize people. It's less risky and you make more money. As my friend Richard used to say, I can sell that, you know, I can sell that bag of cocaine once, but I can sell my 15-year-old boy 5-6 times a day. And if Vice comes busting into my hotel room and I got drugs all over the table, I'm pretty sure where I'm going. But if I'm rolling down the street with a broken tail light and I can explain my way out of it, and I've already told my 14-year-old boy not to say a word, I'm probably okay. So let's think about that kind of thing too, because, you know, I'm not dissing gangs. I know a lot of kids that are in gangs, but gangs do dirt and that's why they're there. So, and gangs are all about making money. So that's going to be easier, a lot more lucrative, and definitely not as dangerous. So, okay, let's talk about the grooming piece a little bit. How are kids groomed into this life? Underlying vulnerabilities can set a victim up to believe they're not worthy of anything else. Also, I think that, you know, we as adults, we're like, no, I wouldn't fall for that. But again, please take your brain back to maybe when you were a child. Take your brain back to maybe some of the students that you serve and understand how easy it is for young people that are especially vulnerable, that especially have a lot of these risk factors, that probably maybe don't have a safe place to stay, maybe don't have that safe adult in their life. think about how easy and how vulnerable those children are, especially if there's system involved. Pimps love system involved kids because they, they're moving around a lot. Mobility can become a risk factor as well. So, I mean, think about that as well, too. So exploiters try to break down the child through isolation, emotional abuse, withholding basic needs and wants, perceived kindness, destruction of self. I think that this all goes in with what, people are they're trying to control. Again, let's go back to, this is child abuse. This is domestic violence. This is about power and control. The more power and control I have over someone, the better it is, the harder it is for them to leave. So, exploiters, pimps, predators, whatever name you want to put on them, they are about power and control, and they seek out vulnerabilities within people. That's why oftentimes young people, maybe in my system, DHS system, any system, everyone's vulnerable. Jason will talk about that as well. But sometimes there are more vulnerabilities that are present. So again, being out on the streets is one of the highest risky things that young people can do. So we really have to be careful on that. So why don't victims leave? Well, first of all, why don't they identify? My very first victim I worked with, she's now an adult, we're still in touch. She used to tell me, hey, Miss Paul, no shame in my game. Nobody's making me do this. I got this. I know what I'm doing. I'm running my own show. And Dr. Bloom talked a little bit about that, but most of the time victims don't believe they're being victimized. They believe that this is what, and remember, let's think about what I said earlier about that coercion and choice thing. Those look very much the same. So a young person who thinks they're making these choices probably are being coerced into some of this stuff, because those are not choices. I always say, I believe that people that are involved, that are being prostituted right now, their exploitation began when they were young. I kind of go to my mantra. Those of you that know me have heard me say this before. Who wakes up at 18 and says, hey, I think I'll become a prostitute. I think I'll get shot full of dope every day, physically assaulted, raped by people I don't know, maybe beat by someone, maybe drug across the floor by the back of my head. Who says that? No one. No one wakes up and says, I want to be a prostitute. Thanks, Cindy. I see that. So why don't victims self-identify? The shame. Some of you talked about it earlier. Number of victims I've worked with really think that this person loves them and wants to take care of them. So they don't really feel like that there is victimization going on. A lot of the juveniles that I work with, legitimate fear of systems. Hey, this is not their first rodeo with law enforcement. It's not their first rodeo with juvenile justice. They get it. They know what it looks like. I had a victim leave and do some really risky things because she didn't want to go back to detention. She's way in her, she's like, hey, which is going to be, I don't know. So again, so why don't victims leave? I find that literally some of the victims that I've worked with literally have nowhere to go. And they report to me that sometimes that's the best place they've ever been. Think about maybe a kid growing up in DHS, my system, being sent to placements, being here, there. Maybe this is in their brain the best place they've ever been. They feel like they have a little more freedom. Threats and fear. You all discussed this with Dr. Bloom. Warrants. Self-disgust, fear of law enforcement and social services. Hey, you don't want to be telling anybody. You don't want them showing up here, running around, doing all that stuff. You just need to keep all this to yourself. So there is that. The trafficker can control the victim by depriving resources, such as food and shelter, psychological hold, physical holds. There are all different ways that youth are victimized by predators. Okay, so now so the methods of control can include love and attention, like a boyfriend, physical control, the gorilla pimp, where he actually lays hands on you, perhaps puts you someplace where you can't come out, emotional control, and as well as blackmailing. So I have about 3 minutes, and I really want to get something that's very important, especially for those of you who do have an opportunity to develop relationships with children. So what can you do? Check in. Build those relationships if you have concerns. Always, always, always encourage people to have a person. If you're not that person, that's okay. Fine. Everybody needs a person. This is proven to be one of the best resiliency factors that we know of, especially for females, is to have that person that they can go to, that trusted adult. So if you believe that there are some children that you are knowing that don't have a trusted adult, you either step up or let's help find someone who can be their trusted adult. Always believe the victim. always. I am unfortunately not the first person, especially on sexual assaults, that the girls I work with report to. That breaks my heart because I always believe. Reporting, this is huge important. By law, by mandate, by everything, you are required to, your first phone call should be to the Department of Human Services. I will put that number in the chat. It's 800-522-3511. It is not up to you to investigate it. It is not up to you to continue to ask questions. It is up to you. Everyone in the state of Oklahoma is a mandated reporter. So it is up to you. If you don't have to have all the information. You just have to suspect it, but you need to stress human trafficking. So by law, you are required to report if you suspect someone is being victimized and they are under the age of 18. I also report to Polaris, which is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, because they do a lot of work nationwide and in case that victim is taken out of the state of Oklahoma. We, of course, if the child is involved DHS juvenile justice and they've gone missing from care, the place that we've asked them to stay, we will also make a report. But I think that it is very important. Some people choose not to report and that's not the right thing to do. And some people choose to try to, oh, let me find out more before I report. No, report. Appreciate your time. Thank you. And I think I am out. So.
Okay. Wow. So you can see why I hooked on to Dr. Bloom and to Paula. You can feel the passion, their information. If you have any questions for them, simply put it in the chat and we'll go through that and ask some of those questions. Also, we had their emails. You can email them directly and go ahead and put that in there. But man, hard subject, but we appreciate you guys with your ability to reach out and let us know what's going on. So up next, we're going to turn it over to Jason Wise, and Paula's email address is in there. Dr. Bloom's is in there, and then we'll get Jason's in there as well. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know you're going to do a screen share, and we're going to continue with, we typically try to keep this at an hour, but guys, we may go over 10 minutes. It's not a subject that you can just fly by night and hey, here's a little bit of information. We're going to leave you hopefully with more questions than answers. And I encourage you to reach out to these people to get those answers. And we'll touch on that a little bit at the end. So Jason, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yeah, good. Okay, cool. Well, first off, I want to thank Cindy for asking me to be a part of this panel, and Dr. Bloom and Paula obviously have a lot of knowledge in this area, and you're probably going to hear some things that overlap a little bit. I may have a little bit different perspective than they do as far as some of the tactics and some of the other areas, but you're gonna definitely hear a common theme, especially when it comes to the grooming and the changes in behavior. But when Cindy asked me to be a part of this group, she asked me to really focus on social media, So what I'm going to do within that is talk about current trends and some of the apps you might want to look out for, especially as teachers and parents yourself. I mean, a lot of the things that I talk about, you're going to be able to apply to your own life, especially since probably most of you have kids or grandkids. And then she also wanted me to talk about the demand culture, what fuels the demand for children, and then also how to protect kids in practical ways. And then I'm also going to talk about grooming as well. The work that I do at the sheriff's office is I go undercover and I pose as a 14-year-old girl. So I'm groomed, unfortunately, several times a day. In fact, I've even been proposed to. It's pretty cool. I've been proposed to as my undercover profile. So it's interesting the depths that these people will go to and the depravity that they will go to if they really truly believe that they're talking to a 14-year-old girl. So again, thank you, Cindy, for this. And so I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully it works. Let's see. Everybody see that okay? Awesome. Okay. So before I get going too far, I want to just invite you guys to come to a Beyond Awareness Summit. It's on the February 4th and 5th. It's hosted by the Demand Project, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the U.S. Marshals, the Tulsa Police Department, and the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. my email's down on the bottom there if you are interested. It's a 2-day event. There's at least, I think we have 24 speakers ranging from law enforcement to social workers to legal to medical. You're definitely welcome to come to that. A little bit about me. I think Cindy did a pretty good job, so I really don't need to get into much of that. I do undercover work with the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. I'm in the child predator unit. I've had 1,000 contacts at least with online predators. I've conducted several undercover operations that has resulted in several arrests and convictions. So jump in here so you guys can get the meat of what we're talking about. So I'm going to start with the social media and the mobile apps and some of the, some stats and trends. Unfortunately, there's endless access points for bad guys. When social media first came out, or even, when the internet came out, there was Yahoo and AOL. So everything was much more, I guess, controlled. But now, with apps and social media and direct messaging and encryption and new apps coming out all the time, it's really, really difficult to keep up with that. Not only on the online predator side, but the online predators and the pimps that recruit kids, a lot of the tactics that they use will overlap. And so you can apply this to your own life and in what you hear in your classrooms to also human trafficking. So some stats. I know that I don't like to bore people with a bunch of stats because it can get monotonous. But a lot of people think that it won't happen to their kid. I crunched some numbers. There's 30 million teens in the USA today. And if you go all the way down to the age 10 to 19, because I don't know how many times I've heard parents say, well, my 10-year-old, my 11-year-old, they have social media. So if you expand that number out, you got 42 million kids between the ages of 10 and 19. The ones in yellow, I really wanted to highlight. So 1 in 25 kids receive an online sexual solicitation in which the solicitor tries to make offline contact. And then 1 in 7 will receive unwanted sexual solicitations. So if you crunch those numbers, and I had a couple people check that, and I'm sure there's going to be somebody that checks it. And if I'm wrong, please let me know. But so if you crunch those numbers, there's between 5.5 or 5.5 and 6 million kids every year are sexually solicited online by a bad guy. And then here's the one that's underneath that, the 25%. That's all that we know about. So you got 6 million and only 25% are actually telling their parents that this is a problem. So we have a really, really, really big problem. As Dr. Bloom and Paula pointed out, this isn't a matter of if it's going to happen to your kid. It's a matter of when. And I'm not talking about human trafficking necessarily, but unwanted sexual solicitations to your child, whether they have Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, they are going to get an unwanted sexual solicitation when they get an access to direct messages. So just keep that in mind as we go through this, because I'll give you some practical things to look at here too. So apps. So we're kind of focused around the social media right now. These are apps that I have on this screen, and you can take a screenshot of it or whatever you want to do with it, that I'm concerned about if a child has on their phone. Kick and Whisper. And there's a couple other here that are kind of obscure, like the Meet Me and Moco Space. They're kind of, spin-offs from Facebook. But, and you see Instagram and you see TikTok and you see Snapchat on there, controlled. Yes. If you're monitoring your kid or, kids in your classroom, you're just watching what they're doing. It can be okay. But, I'm working cases off TikTok, Kick, Instagram, Whisper. Scout is another one that's on there. So just as a highlight on some of these, just to kind of beware on some of the apps that are out there that kids are downloading and using, and predators are using, like Kick, the one over here on the left. That is, if you Google Kick, you'll see story after story after story of kids being approached online on that app. And so that also leads me into another trend that I see a lot, and that is children selling nude photos of themselves for money. And I know you're like, why would somebody do that? But if you talk to a lot of kids right now, unfortunately, sexting is the thing to do, whether you're 12 years old or 15 years old. It's the new first base. And a lot of kids are doing it. And so if they're doing it and it's almost the norm now, what's the big deal of somebody saying, hey, I'll give you 30 or 40 bucks to, flash me on your Snapchat. So it's a big trend. I'm actually working a case or two right now at the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office on this alone. Also, here's some of the apps that the kids are downloading on and getting paid through them. So if your kid has a Cash App or a Venmo, and if they don't have that, I've even had a predator say, hey, I'll give you a gift card through Amazon. So just kind of beware on that. This is just a trend that you need to know about, because that can also transition into trafficking as well. And then so let's get into a little bit of the sexting. I'm sure most of you, maybe there's some counselors on here or even your own kids, talk to them about the consequences of sexting. One of them is, humiliation. Photos are shared or distributed online. There's educational and employment opportunities can be affected if that photo gets out there and people start talking about it. Reputation can be ruined with the immediate community and beyond. There can be issues with school, principals and teachers and counselors. There might be some grounding and some detentions and other things involved with that if you guys find out about it. And then also possible criminal charges. I wouldn't have thought this a couple years ago, that kids would be starting to get charged for these crimes. But, if you're a 14, 15-year-old and you take a picture of yourself nude, you've created child pornography. And if you send it, then you've distributed it. So it's a huge, huge problem. And some states are actually starting to take notice of that and starting to make examples of kids. And so this is a story even out of Maryland that they charged a girl for taking photos and distributing. So just be aware of that. So let's talk about the demand. If there wasn't a demand, there wouldn't be a problem. It's like if you think of a very popular product, Coca-Cola or any BMWs or Chevrolet, if they didn't make the product and people didn't buy it, there wouldn't be a demand for it. So unfortunately, in the area that we're talking about with kids and people buying them, unfortunately, there is an unquenchable hunger to exploit children. So what fuels the demand? You're going to get varying opinions on this, but from what I see and from my experience with all of this for the last 15 years, pornography would be probably at the top of that list. People watch that and fuel their mind full of stuff that they shouldn't be, filling it full of. And then they have a lack of self-control. And I think there's a lot of men out there, if we're going to just be honest, there's a lot of men out there that haven't grown up, and men that don't grow up get bitter. And if you're bitter, then you get dangerous. And I just think pornography and lack of self-control. And then you figure in technology. You don't have to go to the mall. You don't have to go to very far really to be able to groom a child or meet children. With social media and the smartphones, it's created unlimited access points to kids, and then also an unbelievable efficiency for grooming these kids. If you find one kid, you can usually find 10 if their security settings aren't set right to where they can see friends lists. Also, there's a lack of resources to arrest and prosecute. I'll just be frank. There's not a lot of police officers or detectives that really want to work these types of cases. It's very, very graphic, and the victims tend to be not the most cooperative. It's not their fault. It's just their circumstances. But there is a lot of lack of resources to arrest and prosecute, and they're very, very hard cases to prosecute, which I could get. That could be a whole different presentation. But understand also what's fueling the demand. It can be anyone. Like, these are some of my arrests. If you look on this screen here, if you look at these arrests, these people, you couldn't tell if they're married, what their financial status is, or anything about them. So I've arrested multimillionaires. I've arrested people that live by the river, in a trailer down by the river, in a tent by the, just in a, the most extreme financial areas. And you can see there's a little bit of a theme here. It's like Paula said, it's mostly white dudes that are doing this. So, there you go. But you can't really determine who the predator is, because they are really good at manipulating. So how do we protect kids? So let's get into the final thing, because I I got about 3 minutes, and I want to make sure you guys get some meat of this. And then if there's any questions after that, we can get into that, because I know with Dr. Bloom and Paula, you guys probably have a lot of questions for them, and so I want to respect you guys' time and our resources. So as a parent, as a school administrator, how do we protect our kids? So first off, you have to understand who the predators are, which I kind of talked about that at the previous slides. It can be the pillars of the community. It really is. I mean, I just took for the past year or so, I've just jotted down some of the people that have been arrested for this. And I mean, it's like an alcoholic. I mean, if you're an alcoholic, where are you going to go? You're going to go where the bar is, or where the booze is. So if you're into children, where you're going to go? You're going to go where the kids are. And so you can kind of see here just a snapshot of some current predators that have been arrested for sexually exploiting children. So Paula had talked about this a little bit. I think understanding grooming is another major way to protect your kids, because if you read my definition here, I'll read it out loud. Grooming a child online or via social media is a very slow, methodical process of manipulation that involves gaining a child's trust through an emotional connection while simultaneously injecting sexual innuendos that lower the child's inhibitions. So if you read, I won't read the next one, but it does desensitize a child. And honestly, grooming it thrives in secrecy. And the bad guys will really, really push that with the child. This has to stay between us. It has to stay a secret. They'll coach that child how to delete chats, how to delete apps on their phone, but they will work really hard to keep this a secret. Also, so these are just some of the phrases and sayings that guys have said to me while I'm in communication with them when they think that I'm actually a 14-year-old girl. You can kind of read through those. The third one down, I'll treat you like a woman and not a baby. Almost every bad guy I talk to says that. And what they're doing is, how many, you don't have to, well, you can answer it in your head. If you ask a 13-year-old how old she is and she's 13 and a half, 13 or 14, they'll always say, well, I'm 14 and a half. I'm almost 15. Girls want to be older for some reason at that age. And then as we get older, we want to be younger, because we'll have our 29th birthday 15 times, these guys are manipulators. So if they say, I'll treat you like a woman and not a baby, what they're really trying to do is entice that child to be excited about the prospect of being older. Here's some more here. Every single bad guy that I talk to asks for pictures, and usually starts with a picture. Then they say, how about a full body picture? And then they want to see various parts of the kid's body. And they'll even offer to send that child the first picture just to kind of desensitize them. The one that I wanted to point out here is also, they'll turn insecurities into turn-ons. If a child thinks she's overweight, the offender will be attracted to thick girls. If she thinks she's ugly, he'll think she's beautiful. If she's short, he's into short women. Whatever their insecurity is what they're going to, whoops, let me start this. Okay, so I hit my timer, so I'm almost done here. So you can read the other ones. Signs of grooming. Paula touched on this a little bit. The unexpected gifts and clothing, behavioral changes, avoiding time with the family. They'd rather be home alone, taking the phone into the bathroom. If your kid's taking a phone into the bathroom, smack them. Don't let them do that. And then also the communications becoming secret. If the child is in trouble, call the police immediately. Don't mama bear up. Don't notify the suspect that you're calling the police. Notify them immediately. And trust me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This is a war. And I'm telling you, it's an ongoing war, and you have to be in the trenches. You have to be open communication with your kid. And when I go and talk to kids, there's two main things that I really focus on. And in the schools, when I go into the schools, I let them know that they needing to tell someone. These guys are master manipulators, and they will use, like what Paula said, they'll use affection and affirmation and love. And if the child can understand that they are being manipulated and it's okay to tell someone, they need to tell someone. It needs to be a trusted adult, a trusted friend, someone. And also tell your kids out there when you're talking to them, it's okay to say no. If someone asks for an inappropriate photo, it's okay to say no. It really is. Also some parental tips. educate yourself continuously. In law enforcement, I have to stay up on my continuing education. This should now become a continuous education. 13 plus on social media. I'll ask a group of parents and still they shake their head on what I'm talking about. You have to be 13 and up to sign up for Instagram, Snapchat, all these social media sites. I mean, if a child under the age of 13 has social media right now, they lied about their age. And that is not the right way to start a social media life on this platform. And remember, as parents, as teachers, we're educating, we're raising adults, we're not raising kids. We need to prepare them for what they're going to experience. Because like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So they need to be prepared. This is a war. I'm telling you, it's ongoing, it's persistent, it's terrible what's going on online. So it's really arm them with awareness. Talk to your kids, role play with them, let them know, like we do with tornado drills and fire drills. You have a process, create a process for this if something's happening. Treat the connections to the internet like a door to your bedroom and monitor it efficiently. So the bad guys that I showed you, you got to ask the kids, would you allow these guys into your room, in your house? No. So treat the connections to the internet like a door to your bedroom and monitor it correctly or accordingly. And also the last one is on, if they have a Facebook, like the local police department, have them like Locke, have them like the sheriff's department or NRA. I mean, if I'm a bad guy and I'm going through a child's profile and I see that they like the police department, that might be a red flag for me, and I will get away from that child because they're a little bit more savvy probably than most kids. So that's all I got. Thank you. I'm gonna stop the share, right?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Wow. I feel a little emotional drained right now, right? And I hope you in the audience see why I invited these people. And there's so many more out there. This is not Sarah Gadd's out there. I know she's listening. She was my first person that I went and actually took a class from. Phenomenal. There are phenomenal people out there teaching. And so this is where we at the State Department of Ed, we learn from these people. So, I mean, I'm a mama, right? I'm a mama of 3 girls and I'm a Mimi of 4 grandbabies, and my heart hurts. It really, really hurts. So, Jason Gray, if you'll pull up. So Jason Wise put this out there. Again, it's just one of Denny's class. I'm gonna promote it because I'm actually a student in her class and so excited. Paula teaches all sorts of research-based programs. So she has phenomenal resources available as well. This is Jason's a summit that we've been to it as a team. And this year we have 3 of us from the State Department that'll be speaking at this. We have 2 of our and I believe Dr. Olinger is on here, and she'll be teaching. She's a school psychologist, and Trisha Goga. They're both school psychologists for the State Department of Education, and they'll both be teaching on the psychological issues of that. And then I'll be doing a presentation that I do for schools on just the basics of human trafficking. And so if you guys make it out there, that's great. So we'll go ahead. Someone asked if this will be recorded. Yes, it is. So let's see, Jason, we'll go to the next slide real quick. So this is my information. And if you want additional information, feel free to reach me, reach them specifically. We do provide in-service school professional development, so we can come out and train as well. We've done that for a few schools. Here's my email, my phone number, and then there's our school safety and security website. Go on there. You can rewatch this webinar. That was one of the questions. You can rewatch this webinar as well as all of the other webinars that we've conducted once a month. So they're there. We will host those on there, and there's so much more goodness on our website. We encourage you to go there. In a day or 2, you will be receiving an email, probably from School Safety and Security. It'll have a short survey. If you complete that short survey, then automatically a completion certificate will pop up, and you can print that out on there as well. So, and also Karen Smith, She's the secretary of the Oklahoma Coalition Against Human Trafficking that I deal with, that Paula's the chair of, and Denny is a member of, as well as the Oklahoma State Department of Education is one of those coalition members. But there is her email address, Karen Smith. If you want to find out more about Oklahoma Coalition Against Human Trafficking, please reach out to her, as well as Denny, Jason, and Paula. So we've kind of walked through. Can you have this summit online, Zoom later for the Beyond Awareness Summit? That would be a Jason Wise question. Is this going to be available Zoom, or can they watch this? I know you have amazing AWARE programs throughout the Tulsa area. You might want to answer that question.
No, it's not going to be streamed.
Okay. Are there any presentations that can be shared with parents about social media sites and suggestions for parents? Again, and I don't have a parent presentation, but Dr. Bloom, Paula, or Jason maybe help you with that.
Sure. Yeah. If they want to email me, I can help them with that at the jason@thedemandproject.org.
All right. So as I said, there are so many really great experts in this field, and it makes me sad that we have to have so many great experts. I want to mention Paula Royce had put in the chat, adultification is one in big grooming, whereas Jason said they're going to say, hey, I'll treat you like a woman instead of a baby girl that everybody else treats you. So that adultification, making them feel like that they're bigger and older than they are. We're going to go through this chat. We'll save the chat, and if there's something specific, we will see if we can reach out to those. But last call for questions, comments. As we're doing that, I just want to thank you, Dr. Bloom, for sharing your expertise and taking the time to visit with Oklahoma educators. Jason, as always, it's just phenomenal, and the amount of information out there on social media is mind-boggling. And then Paula, and your passion is just unrivaled, and your knowledge, and so much more information. And maybe later, if in your surveys, if you put on there, hey, we want to have more webinars like that, I'll bring them all back together and we'll do a longer webinar, or each one can have their own webinar. We want to do what Oklahoma educators need. So thank you very much. Again, this will be recorded. It'll be on our sde.ok.gov school safety and security website. Thank you, panelists. I appreciate you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.